Hi. This is my perspective on the Scram 411 from Royal Enfield. At the outset, I'll begin with a disclaimer stating that I am not a Royal Enfield fanboy, and Royal Enfield as a brand has got no value for me. When I was wanting to buy a bike for myself, I have recently come to a place where the roads are slightly constricted. There isn't much space on the roads, and plus parking is a pain. So I wanted to keep a bike for myself for riding around town. And here also, because the distances are short and limited, riding a bike made much sense. And so initially, when I was homing on to which bike to buy, I came down to the V-Strom 250 of Suzuki, and also the Scram 411 of Himalayan. Partly because these were the two bikes which were available on hand at the showroom, so I did not have to wait for these bikes to arrive. These two bikes were already available in the showroom, so they became the primary choice for me. When I went and saw the V-Strom 250, the positive of that bike is the 250cc engine, even though is considerably smaller than the 411cc on this, still generates more power, more acceleration, and is a better engine overall with more durability also. But the only negative with that bike which I found was that the bike which was standing in the showroom was orange in color. Orange is not my taste. Second, the bike was very light, and which is a very good thing. When I got onto the bike, it was very light, which is always a good thing. But also there was a lot of paneling of fiber on the bike, which may not survive a fall if I was to have one. And I do know myself that I will surely get into situations once I have the bike in my hand where I might fall. And also, with this bike, I've already taken a fall once. So that was true for me, and I thought that the durability of the fiber panels on the V-Strom 250 will be an issue for me. But the only problem with that bike, which major problem for me, was the suspension on the bike. It had normal standard suspension of a road bike. It did not have long travel suspension on the V-Strom, which was a major negative for me. I mean, if you are going to make an ADV, there were good tires on it. I think the tires are very similar to what I have on this bike, but the suspension has to be longer. So overall, the bike did not make sense as to why it looks a certain way, but is actually a road bike within. So it's like I'm cheating myself with that bike. So and also again, because the color which was available was orange, which did not suit me, and for any other color I would have had to wait at least a month or maybe more. And so then I went to the Royal Enfield showroom and I saw this bike. And with this bike, I again will say that I'm not a Royal Enfield fanboy myself. In fact, I maintain that the quality of a Royal Enfield has a lot of distance to go. And this I say from the previous ownership experiences of people who owned Royal Enfields. And I've also ridden these bikes over a period of time. The chassis quality, the engine quality, the overall quality of the bike I found was a miss. So then why did I buy this bike? So when I went to the showroom and laid my eyes on this bike, it was standing there. I had a purely emotional reaction to this bike. I did not have an idea of what kind of bike was beautiful to me. But when I saw this bike in the showroom, it was absolutely, it struck a chord with my heart. And so I immediately wanted it. And so this emotional reaction of mine is actually what made me buy this bike. Everything else which I have noticed or understood about the bike is subsequent to that. But the first and only aspect I think because of which I bought this bike is because of the emotional reaction. Because I liked it in the first go. In fact, I paid out money the very same day for two reasons. One, because I liked the bike so much, and second, because I knew that this bike would be in demand, and there was one bike standing in the showroom which was unclaimed. So I wanted to claim it for myself before somebody else made the payment and put their name on the bike. The buying experience is a different thing from Royal Enfield showroom, which I will delve on later. So with that, I'll just straight away come to some of the major aspects of the bike which also struck a good chord with me. One is these dual purpose tires of the bike. It has nice thick dual purpose tires, both at front with spoke wheels. These are 19-inch tires up front and 17-inch tires at the rear. And a 1917 setup is an ideal for a bike which is slightly off-road biased. I won't call these off-road biased completely, but these are slightly off-road biased, and they do very well on road and off-road as well. The bike also has ABS with disc brakes up front and behind, and the ABS cannot be switched off, which is a bummer because every time I try and brake, the braking performance is slightly subpar, because every time I try and brake and in pressure situations or emergency situations, I find that the rear brake skips and brakes and skips and brakes and skips and brakes, and which leads to a braking situation which is not very confidence inspiring. I feel that the brakes should come on faster, and even if it is a skid that results out of it, but it should stop faster. I think because of the ABS, it stops a little slower. The engine is a 411cc engine, which is not in that shiny alloy aluminum finish which I find on other Royal Enfield bikes, which is a good thing. I really like bikes which have more black on them, and that also matte black finish. Another thing which I really liked about the bike was the good ground clearance. This bike has got ground clearance which is much more than normal standard bikes. The rear has a monoshock. I was very clear at the outset that I wanted a bike with a monoshock. Any bike which has dual shocks behind in today's day and age is subpar for me. It made no sense. If I'm going to buy a bike today in 2022, then it has to have a monoshock. So that was one thing which was very clear to me. The suspension travel up front, I'll have to fact check, is I think 190 mm, and behind the suspension travel is 180 mm, which is again good quality of or good length of suspension travel. I think any bike that claims that they are slightly off-road focused or capable off-road have to have at least this much of suspension travel, which is also a good thing, and it really was one of the deciding factors for me. And because of this longish suspension travel, the normal on-road duties on this bike is very comfortable. It is very, very comfortable. I have a bad back from years of doing what I do, and so it actually there is no discomfort on this motorcycle when I ride it because of the soft suspension. Have I tried off-roading on this motorcycle? Yes, I have tried off-roading on this motorcycle also, and the first two gears are very tractable. They have got a lot of torque, and the patch where I did off-roading, a lot of other bikes had attempted and stopped. And I am not an off-roader, or I don't have any experience doing off-road prior to this, but I found that if I just gave the bike direction and kept it in first gear, it was automatically able to go over big stones without slipping, and was able to balance itself more or less. That also brings me to the weight of the bike. I think the weight of the bike, being only a 24 bhp bike, it's only 24 bhp, but the weight of the bike, 185 kilos dry. And once you put fuel inside, it's got a 15-liter fuel tank. So once you put fuel inside, is at least about 195 kgs. And 195 kilos or 190 kgs for a bike which has got only 24 horsepower is actually, I'll say it's just about sufficient, but it could have been much more. If they had made the bike lighter, I think the bike would have performed much more. But there's a caveat to this, and that is because of the heavy weight of the bike. It handles and rides very well because the bike is able to grip the road when riding. And this is in stark contrast to a Thunderbird, which I used to ride of Royal Enfield for some time. Another officer had given me his Thunderbird for riding when I had come initially. So that bike had absolutely no grip. It was top heavy. The tires were skimpy. They were slim. So in contrast, I find that this bike gives me a lot of confidence in maneuvering. So that is one good thing on this bike. I also find that the frame is slightly stiff, which is also confidence inspiring. It gives you a sturdy feeling when you're riding this bike. Everybody already knows that this bike is derived out of the Himalayan 411, but I think this is a much smarter bike. I personally, the design of the Himalayan is not to my taste. The 21-inch front wheels are too slim for me, visually at least. And when I saw this bike, although it is a derivative, one has to agree, of the of the Himalayan 411, but this is a much better looking bike. It is slightly rough around the corners, but then I think that goes with the kind of person that I am. I don't want my bike to be too perfect. The color scheme on this, the graphite silver with red. Red, initially I wasn't very sure of whether I like this red or not, but I now realize that as a design, it is giving it a good contrast with the silver and a very dull silver and red, and with the other parts being all black. The brakes I've already spoken about could have been better. They are by Bybre. Bybre stands for by Brembo, which is a subsidiary. I really like that the rear has got this raised mudguard, and this is plastic. The front mudguard is also plastic. As of yet, I have ridden the bike for maybe 3 months, and I find that there is no rattling on the bike, except one place in the front. Here inside, I've come to know that there is a rattling, but that is because there is a lead which is spare, and that tends to shake when the bike is going over bumps, and that lead is probably for this additional dial which one is able to opt for. I think that's a navigation device. One can opt for it. That will come here. One can opt for the navigation device. It will come here. And the lead, which is extra inside, which keeps shaking inside, is actually for this navigation device. So it's not an issue. It has a single dial, which initially was not to my taste, but now I realize that this dial is good enough. It probably has grown on me. Also, one of the good features on this bike is that every time you put it in gear, it shows if it is in neutral or in first gear or second gear, so which is a good thing. The handles are aluminium, which is a good touch, makes them look sturdy. The finish on the bike is still subpar. I find that this rubber does keep coming off. It doesn't stay in place. It will come off from here, and then I have to put it back in place again. You look at this piece of rubber. This is much smaller than probably what was required. There is so much space which is left. The welding is okay. I like that they are slightly rough around the edges. I just hope that they do not fail or break. Royal Enfield also sells a cover for this part of the bike. This is for the brakes, and if I have to buy a cover separately of aluminium or any other metal for this part, it makes no sense, because on other bikes it comes ab initio from the factory. I do not know why they don't give it initially when they sell the bike, and then you have to buy that cover separately for this. It makes no sense. I think it's wrong on their part. They're charging so much for this bike. They should give this small plate cover for this in the initial time itself. I also like that the wheels have this black finish on them, on the rims. uh, which actually looks very good. Somehow the spokes you have to keep with, because you have to keep them with spokes, because there isn't any option given by Royal Enfield for this setup. The front is 19. You can get aftermarket alloy wheels, but they don't make sense because they look very gaudy. Because of the alloy wheels, in case there is a puncture, there is going to be an issue, because these wheels are with tube, they're not tubeless wheels, so that is going to be an issue. And also that issue is going to get exaggerated because it doesn't have a center stand, it just has a side stand. Center stand maybe can be added, but I don't want to add one because it will take away from the appearance of the bike. My buying experience with the Royal Enfield. So initially when I went and bought the bike, I had to pay, or I was made to pay approximately 18,000 extra from the ex-showroom price of the bike, and they told me that the bash plate below and the mirrors were also to be paid for, which made no sense. And initially, because I have a trusting nature and because I personally do not cheat people, so I was hoping that I will not be cheated also, and so I paid the money and got the bike home. But then subsequently I spoke to other people and got to know that I had been cheated. And so what they did is that the invoice, how I got to know is because the invoice that I was given when the bike was being sent for registration and I had to make signatures, so there the ex-showroom price was 2,03,000, which they made some bahana, or they made some excuse, and I couldn't understand as to why they had charged me more, but the invoice was lesser. And so then I later on got in touch with the customer care of Royal Enfield and checked from there. So what the showroom people had done is that they had made an invoice for me at their own end at the showroom itself, and the original invoice which was mailed to them from Royal Enfield, that they had kept with themselves. When I spoke to the customer care, I came to know that the original invoice had been sent by Royal Enfield on an email address which was incorrect. So what the showroom people had done is that they had given their own email address to Royal Enfield where the invoice came to them, and then they generated another invoice at the showroom and gave it to me. Why they did this is obviously to cheat me and others like myself, who probably would have bought the bike and paid thinking that they will not be cheated. But thankfully I was able to find out and I was able to retrieve my money from these guys. And I do not think that I can blame Royal Enfield for this. This is just a standard problem which we face with the dealers across the country. They're all prone to making as much money as possible and at your expense, and at your and my expense. So this is my initial impressions and things that I felt were important regarding the bike. Will I feel that I'm having a good time with the bike? Absolutely. I look forward to riding the bike on a daily basis. Sometimes people have stopped and in traffic people have stopped and given me compliments on the bike, which is always a good thing. The 410cc single cylinder generates adequate power. However, it could have had maybe 3 or 4 bhp more. I think that would have been even better. But the power is adequate for the kind of riding that I do, and it has got enough juice in it for overtakes. That is not an issue. If you want a frenetic overtaking bike, or you want something with additional power, then probably you'll have to look at something else. But for me, when I saw this bike, it was absolutely, I really liked it from the first instance. And the no nonsense, pure motorcycle look of this bike, I think this is how, for me at least, I think this is how a motorcycle should be. This is how it should look. This is how, maybe with a little lesser red on it, but this is how a motorcycle should be designed. The design should be pure. It should look lesser like a fish than probably, or a shark maybe, to be kinder than what these present day motorcycles look like. I think this is how it should be. Only thing which I would like to add probably onto this is a very small screen up front. I think if I add a very small screen up front, I think that will add to the look of the value, or the look of the bike, or it will add to the value of the bike, at least in my eyes. I like that the bike is tall up front. Uh, One small gripe that I also have from this bike is that the seat height is a little on the lesser side, which after taking that fall I realized is kind of okay. But would I like it slightly taller? Yes, I would like the bike to be slightly taller. Absolutely. Do we need handlebar risers? I have done some off-roading on this bike standing on the foot pegs, and without handlebar risers also I think it was adequate. The only modification I've got done is I've had the seat modified with this cloth on top. This is a polyurethane cloth with this dotted finish. What this allows is some amount of air circulation even when I am riding on top. And I put this net on top because when I not carrying my bag and I have to take something along with me, or I buy something, so I can very easily put it underneath and it stays in place. So that is about it. Thank you. If you waited for about 20 odd minutes for me to go on about my bike, thank you so much.